You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your Amac podcast, Better for America. I am delighted to say that we are joined today by a leader in the U.S. House, a champion for a strong economy for seniors, veterans, and a cohesive foreign policy, Congressman Tom Emmer. Congressman Emmer serves on the Financial Services Committee and is part of the House leadership team. He is also the father of 7. And if I have it right, Congressman, a former hockey coach. Welcome to our show today, Congressman.
You do, Rebecca, and thank you. By the way, loved your father and glad that you're continuing on in his footsteps. Great to be with you.
Oh, that's so nice to hear, and I'm so glad that my father decided to form Amac to compete with AARP, and we are doing a great job at 2.4 million members. Matter of fact, Congressman Tom Emmer is the Republican of Minnesota's 6th district. You are in your 4th term. So happy to have you with us today. I believe we have over 6,000 members in your district alone. So you know that we are one of the fastest growing conservative organizations in America. Our members, Congressman, they love our country, but they are concerned about our Constitution, our economy, our foreign policy, and really the trajectory of America's leadership. What they see especially is, well, it's really hard for me to begin because there's a lot going on, but they're seeing a real hard shift by the Biden administration to the left. And that hard shift is really going against the grain of American history. The administration and Democrats across the country seem to be pushing for open borders, massive new spending, reducing funding and respect for law and order and for our law enforcement. They want a reorientation of American education away from facts over into some sort of leftist ideology. And a lot of our members would say even dangerous foreign policy. So as a leader in the U.S. House, as a lawyer, and the father of 7 children, what do you think are the top issues confronting our country today?
Well, I think you've named them. Number one is always going to be the economy. And right now, it's this incredible, insatiable desire by Democrats to spend. You know, the so-called American Recovery Plan that was almost a $2 trillion spending bill passed last February. They were warned by economists on the left that this could spike inflation, Rebecca, and they ignored it. Well, guess what? The problem they thought, they being the Democrats, and these aren't even Democrats for your members. These are the new socialist Democrats of America. And I'm not making that up. That's the term that they've used. When you talk about Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, when you talk about Rashida Tlaib, you talk about Ayanna Pressley, you talk about Cori Bush or Ilhan Omar, and the list goes on and on. They have proudly announced that socialists have arrived. Your members should keep in mind that every time they see the term progressive, that is simply a national news media trying to mask the fact that these people are proud of the fact that they carry the socialist mantra, and it's really the economy. I'll get back to the Recovery Act in a second. It's going to be the border is a big issue for base Republicans, I would say, big issue for our country. And the crime wave that's going across this country is something that they created through this insanity of defund the police. In fact, these new socialist Democrats are now the party of defund the police. So those are the big issues. For your members, I think the one that I'd love to focus on today is the spending issue, because the socialist Democrats thought the mistake that the Obama administration had made back during its time was it didn't go big enough with its stimulus package. Well, again, Larry Summers, a Democrat who worked for Obama, warned them that this is going to be a problem. They ignored him. They passed a $1.9 trillion spending bill. And what have we seen since, Rebecca? 5% inflation. It's starting to grow. People see the prices rising at the pump. They see the prices rising in the grocery store. And they know it's directly related to the Biden administration and their policies and their spending. And this is something that we need to focus on, especially for our retired or retiring communities.
Yeah, and we know today that the Senate voted 69-30 to approve the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. That's a historic piece of legislation. We think it will reshape American lives for decades. And then immediately following the infrastructure vote, the Senate voted 50-49 to begin debate on a $3.5 trillion budget resolution in hopes of passing a broader package of investments. And they don't have the support of Republicans. So, Congressman, what kind of inflationary pressure will this put on our economy? And is this the kind of, is this debt really healthy for America? Can you elaborate
No,
a little bit more? I know you started to, but, our members see it, as you've mentioned. What kind of inflationary
absolutely.
pressure will we see coming out of this bill?
Yeah, it's absolutely not healthy. You're going to spend, I think one person has told me, I've got to verify it, that the $5 to $6 trillion that we will have spent in just the last 14 months, whatever it is more than all of World War II. And I mean, you're talking about just doing it in a matter of months. This is not healthy. And by the way, Rebecca, your members will know this, but when you flood the marketplace with cash, which we've been doing, as a government, when you flood the marketplace with cash, you have an interrupted or limited supply of goods and services, right? Services, labor, for instance, because you have created disincentives in the marketplace by supplementing unemployment insurance and making it more lucrative for someone to stay out of the workforce than to get back into it. And then you have pent-up demand, where you've got consumers, Americans who have been basically locked out of the marketplace in many cases for 12 months, 14 months or more. This flood of cash, limited supply, pent-up demand does what? It drives up prices. Now, Democrats will tell you it also drives up wages. The problem is, if you're running up the down escalator, you're not making any progress. And in many cases, you're going backward. So it costs more to live. It's the increasing costs and the higher cost of living that should concern all of us. And if you're going to continue to do this outrageous spending, you are going to have more inflation. In fact, we'll see we've had 5% based on the last report since just the beginning of the year. This is the largest inflation growth since before the 2008 crash. And even though Jay Powell and others have suggested that it might be transitory, they've made it very clear. I disagree with that, by the way. It's not transitory unless you get your spending under control in the marketplace. But even if it was transitory, they've said that this is going to continue on for months. So I don't know if you're interested, but I believe retiring is something that Americans do a great job of saving for and planning for. And it's more important now than ever. And this inflation issue that they're creating, Rebecca, is going to make the goal of retirement more difficult for our hardworking Americans to achieve. A lot of times, a portion of American savings for retirement are tied up in assets like a house or stocks, which is great. But what people do not realize when making a smart decision to invest their savings in property or in the marketplace is that decades down the line, when you're looking to sell that asset to retire, you could owe a lot in capital gains tax due to the inflation. Now, you know that the Biden administration, you mentioned it in your opening, they have gone hard left. President Biden actually campaigned on being more of a moderate, and he's gone all the way to the left. In fact, on capital gains, they're talking about raising it from about 23% up to almost 40%. Now, for Americans working toward retirement, I believe capital gains taxes should be indexed for inflation, which is why I've offered something called the Retirement Inflation Protection Act, which could create a safeguard for retiring Americans' hard-earned assets that will enable you to retire more comfortably. Specifically, the bill makes it clear that taxes are not owed on gains that are simply a result of inflation. This applies to individuals who are at least 59 and a half years old who have held certain assets like property or stocks for at least 3 years. And we reintroduced it last February. I had no idea, Rebecca, based on what they were talking about doing, that they would really go forward with it in the face of criticism from people like Larry Summers, but they did. And here we are, 5% inflation, growing. Now more than ever, we need to push the Retirement Inflation Protection Act.
Yeah, that is great work that you're doing. Congressman, you are the chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, and in that role, you work to elect thoughtful Republicans to the U.S. House. So as we approach these 7 painful months with Joe Biden as president, one cannot help but look back and wish for the days of Donald Trump. The prior Republican administration, in my opinion, they offered sound fiscal policy, reduced crushing regulations, focused on energy independence, law and order, securing our border, and foreign policies that put America first. So I have a twofold question for you. First, how did we get so far off so fast? It's only been 7 months. It feels like a whole new world. And how do we get the country back on track?
Well, it's a great question, a pretty obvious answer. I think this new president came in, and the people around him, more importantly, thinking they had a mandate from the American public to erase everything the prior administration did. But what they didn't understand is the Trump policies were incredibly popular. You know, whether it was an energy policy for energy independence in this country, whether it was secure borders, whether it was making sure that American companies were allowed to compete here at home and around the world on a fair and transparent playing field. These policies were very popular. And right from day one, when the new president sat down on Inauguration Day and executed some 15 to 20 executive orders, which included eliminating, stopping a construction of the Keystone Pipeline and destroying the 11,000 great paying jobs that came with it, and proceeded, quite frankly, to undo American energy independence. You saw prices rising at the pump. Then we got a border crisis that did not exist back in January, that this administration has created by completely ignoring the border, by stopping construction of the wall, by making sure that our Customs and Border Patrol don't have the ability, don't quite frankly have the tools and the manpower to stop the incoming flood across our border. And in fact, some of us believe that this administration has literally ceded our southern border to the drug cartels. And then we've talked about the inflation issue, which is going to be huge. As I said earlier, Rebecca, Democrats say wages are rising, but with inflation, Americans can't afford their basic needs with the increased wages that they're receiving because the federal government flooded the economy with cash. The consumer price index for May accelerated at its fastest pace in nearly 13 years. This is because of President Biden's unprecedented government spending. And the CPI in May of 2021 increased 0.6%. And as I said earlier, we've seen a cumulative 5% increase from May 2020. This is the fastest rate of inflation, again, since right before the 2008 crisis. It's nearly a 13-year high. Americans are paying more for everything. Democrats' socialist agenda is creating a tax on every hardworking American. And how do you deal with that, Rebecca? Find a candidate. Show up, be counted, make sure your vote is counted. Volunteer as a judge in your local precinct, a voting judge. Make sure that you ensure you're part of the solution, ensuring that your election in your local community is fair and transparent, and that you know your vote and other legitimate votes are actually being counted. That's how you take care of it.
Yeah, as you pointed out, so many Americans were in favor of many of the Trump policies. Like the man, love the man, hate the man. Many admit and recognize today that he was on the right track as it went as far as border security, putting America first. And notably, 70% of CPAC attendees this year favored Trump running again. Although we also have a very strong bench of patriotic Republicans, all of whom are concerned for our future. So we don't know what really Trump's decision will be, but I need to ask you, do you think President Trump will run again? And should he?
I have no idea,
No
Rebecca.
idea.
You know, 4 years in politics is more than just one lifetime.
Yeah.
People have to understand these things change from week to week, month to month. President Trump is definitely going to be a big voice in the American political scene. He basically has turned it on its head over the last several years. But look, Americans are waking up. Freedom is not free. It doesn't just happen because you live in the greatest free country the world has ever known. It happens because you understand why we're the greatest free country on the face of the planet. You asked me earlier, you got to understand little basics about economics. You got to understand that when people are trying to tell us in our schools that somehow this country was founded on white nationalism, no, it wasn't. Our founders founded this country on the concept of freedom and opportunity for everyone. We recognize, unlike these new socialists, that it's much better for people, the individual, through their own hard work and initiative and talent, to allocate limited resources, whatever they may be, than it is for the government to do it. And I'm going to guarantee that you've got a lot of your members out there, probably all 6,000 plus in my district, who have read or been exposed to at one time or another a book called The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek, an Austrian economist who wrote this during World War II to his elitist intellectual buddies in Europe who thought socialism was the way to go. Because guess what? Unlike the free market where people are competing with one another and some people have talents that others don't, and it can be uneven how the allocation works because it's based on talent, initiative, and hard work. Guess what? In a socialist society, government allocates those resources and everyone can have a roof over their head and food to eat and clothes on their back. And it can be a utopia, social utopia. Guess what? The whole point of his book is resources are scarce. And if you allow government to allocate resources, it will be great if you're part of the group in government that makes the decision how to allocate those resources. If, on the other hand, you're not in the deciding group, you may not like how those resources are being allocated, and God forbid you might complain. Because at first, they will take your liberty, and then after that, as we've seen in countries like Venezuela, now we're seeing it up front and close in Cuba again, they might take a lot more than your liberty, Rebecca. So there's a lot at stake in these campaigns. People need to pay attention, and your members, educate your kids, your grandkids, fill in what our schools may not have been doing over the last few years.
Yeah, so we do know that we are in for an inflation hurricane, perhaps the worst inflation since the 70s, right under Jimmy Carter. And we do know that runaway federal spending is putting fuel on the fire, with the Biden team policies causing the cost of everything to rise. I mean, I was just at the grocery store, and the chicken was just 3 times what I was paying for a couple pounds of chicken. Gasoline, I'm getting a half a tank. I used to be able to fill up my tank, a full tank of gas. Now I'm getting half a tank for the same money. We see lumber prices increasing. Steel and farming supplies are skyrocketing. So this is a real concern for American seniors. I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about your the work that you're doing, Congressman. You touched on it a little bit. I think that is really good for us to understand some of the bills and work that you're really focused on. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners so that they can really understand the good work that you are doing?
I would, but I just want to amplify that one message you just gave. I mean, what we're seeing right now, Rebecca, is what happens when you put Democrats in charge. And it should be a wake up to every one of your members. Nationwide, prices are up on everything. You talk about chicken. Gasoline is up by over 56% since the beginning of the year. Transportation services are up by over 11% since just May of 2020. Food and energy prices together have increased almost 4%. That's the fastest since 1992. We've seen an increase of 110% for car rentals from last year, 30% more for used cars, 10% more for bikes, almost a quarter more for airfares, and the prices have gone up for hotels, auto insurance, furniture. You talked about chicken. Try bacon's gone up by over 13%. Milk's up by almost 10%. clothes are up by over 5%. And I think you referenced plywood. I'm going to tell you, lumber prices alone have risen 124% in this
Unbelievable.
market. But that's not the only thing. Crime that you referenced earlier, I mean, we've got homicides that have increased by over 41% in the Minneapolis area. Metropolitan areas across the country, it's not limited to our city. They're more dangerous today than they've been in years. And it is these policies. So when we talk about the other side, you really need to start paying attention to what's happening. For us, I mean, we've been involved. This is the premier thing that we're working on. When it comes to seniors, we want to make sure that our seniors get the promises that were made to them back when they were in their 20s and 30s and they were starting their family, and people told them, this is what Social Security is going to provide you. This is what Medicare and Medicaid is going to provide. This is what these different social safety nets are going to provide if you pay into the system. If you are a productive member of our community, and if you're paying in, guess what? This is what you should expect to receive. Our job, I believe, Rebecca, is to look forward for future generations, how we might make this better, how we might make it more effective in terms of sustainability. But as for those past promises, we're working every day to make sure that our seniors have the promises that were made to them, that they counted on, making sure that those commitments are met. And this Retirement Inflation Protection Act that I talked about earlier, I believe is the number one thing we need to look at right now. I've had it out there before, but again, we had no idea, especially based on how President Biden campaigned, that he and his political cronies were going to come in and go crazy. We should have been able to predict it, but they were going to go crazy with this spending. They were going to drive inflation. That's why we need a safeguard for retiring Americans and their hard-earned assets. And again, specifically this bill would amend the Internal Revenue Code to clarify that taxes are not owed on gains that are simply a result of inflation. So all of your members who are listening to this should understand that's the key. When you hear Neil Kashkari or somebody else talking about the Fed's goal is 2% inflation, ask yourself why. Why? Why are you supposed to be taxed another 2%? Because that inflation is what they're taxing your retirement savings by reducing its value by 2%. Now you've got these crazy government policies driving real inflation, the cost of goods and services all across our economy, and your assets are going up as a result as well. But again, it's just like running up the down escalator. If we don't put something in place like the Retirement Inflation Protection Act, you're the ones that are going to get, you're going to be on the short end. So I really think of all the things I've been working on, Rebecca, this one right now is not only timely, but it perhaps is the most important one.
It sure is timely. And that's great. It's interesting because our members, many of whom are over the age of 65, we are a 50-plus organization, and we'll take anybody can join AMAC at any age. But we had polled our members, and we said to our members, this was earlier in the year, we said, what are some of the issues that you would really like to see AMAC supremely focus on? Because we're here to protect their Social Security solvency, their Medicare. We're against Medicare for all. And we work on a large range of topics, ideas that there's so much that we're doing. And our members said to us, stop the teaching of critical race theory in the schools. Isn't that interesting that our members said we are more concerned about the America that we are going to leave behind to future generations? And so I just wanted to quickly touch on this because it seems that, as we both said, and we both concur, that the Biden administration has gone so hard left. When he ran, he promised many people who voted for him probably did not think that they would see what they're seeing today. But it seems to me that the administration anyway, while education should really be left up to the states and school boards, et cetera, and parents, et cetera, but that he is behind also this sort of critical race theory. We've got a magazine. It's a bi-monthly magazine. This issue is just hitting mailboxes. We do an in-depth look at critical race theory and how that impacts America and America's children. What are your thoughts on critical race theory, and what can people in their own states, what would you recommend that they do to make their voice be heard?
Get involved in your public schools. Start to show up at school board meetings. Ask for the curriculum. Be much closer to your students. Jackie and I raised 7 kids through a great school district. In the district that I represent, Rebecca, within the last 30 days, it came to our attention that a central Minnesota school district decided to take about $80,000 worth of CARES money. Now, this was money that was given with flexibility so that schools, in my mind, could retrofit classrooms for protection of teachers and students while we were dealing with the pandemic, so we could get students back into the classroom. Some kids, I would say a minimum number, not only succeed, but they really take off at online, education. Many of us, and I use the word us because I believe this would have been me, if you would have told me to sit in front of a computer all day and do my schoolwork, Rebecca, I can guarantee you that camera would have been off and I would have been down at the hockey rink for about 8 hours a day. We've got to have these kids back in the classroom. We've got to have them socializing again. Young people should not be wearing masks, especially when you talk about the youngest of our children who are learning how to recognize and communicate and socialize. You are stealing precious development time from them. But here, instead of taking that $80,000 and retrofitting classrooms, they hired some equity company to come in and survey 4th graders, Rebecca. And one of the things that came out was a 4th grade boy. One of the questions asked him what gender he identifies as. And he was confused. He had no idea. He's in 4th grade, Rebecca. He had no idea what that was about. And he asked the person administering the survey, don't know it was a representative from the company or a teacher. As I sit here, my staff would know better than that. I was so upset when I heard this. I couldn't get past the details. Whoever was administering the survey told this young 4th grade boy that you can't talk to your parents about this. They told all the kids they could not talk to them about the survey questions. Look, we got to get back into our schools. We got to start looking at the curriculum. You need to show up and be part of your school board. You need to engage with your teachers who are apparently being trained in things that we would not necessarily agree with. You need to be able to hold those schools accountable, and you need to make sure that your children are learning about what made this country great, what makes this country great. Are the people that founded it were fleeing from dictators and monarchs and those that would not give freedom of opportunity. And what they wanted freedom and opportunity for everyone, regardless of their race, creed, gender. That's what this country's all about, and that's what we should be teaching. The golden rule, treat others as you would have them treat you, and treating respect and love. That basically was what this is all about. Instead, we apparently have a section of our society that have gotten involved in our education system, and they want to teach something that feels more like hate, feels more like division, feels more like separating us based on how we look, the color of our skin, our ancestors, and that's not the American way. So I'm glad Amac is looking at it. I think there are several of us that need to start pushing back a little bit, saying, whoa, wait a second. There's nothing wrong. And we should always study all of our history, the good and the bad, because if we don't, we're bound to repeat the bad. We want to improve on the good. We don't want to repeat the bad. So let's get back to a place where we can have constructive dialogue and we can train the next generation of Americans to understand what American exceptionalism is actually all about.
That is a great message, and I think talking about it is so important. I was speaking with a colleague, and we were saying, what can average people do today? We're feeling so much censorship if you don't go along with the mainstream media. School districts don't want to give parents a platform to express their concerns and their views, and I think that engaging with your neighbors, sitting across the table with your teenage child or your grandchild, talking about these things is important. People need to be educated. And so I thank you so much, because that is a very good, strong reminder that getting involved can have long-lasting effects. And it's so important, and we need to do that. And that's one of the reasons why our members want us to really make some noise about critical race theory and get involved. And, we've got delegates across, we've got over about 335 folks that are extremely active on a grassroots level in their states, doing a lot of work. People can learn more about that if they go to amacaction.org. That is our advocacy arm. Congressman, this has been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You have literally lifted my spirits, just knowing that you're there. You're a leader who cares, and you're fighting for this country, and it means so much to me and a great deal to our membership. We'll have to see the days ahead. There'll be testing, but I will remain hopeful and optimistic. I thank you so much for being with us, Congressman. Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you for having me, and thank you for the job you're doing and the job AMAC and its members are doing. Remember, the world is run by those who show up. So please stay engaged. AMAC is a powerful voice with all of you together. Thank you.
Thank you. And to all of you listening out there, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, simply go to your app store. You'll find the AMAC News app. It's free. It's easy. We take no personal information. Please make sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe to everything AMAC. AMAC was formed to ensure that we pass forward a free, strong, healthy, and well-grounded America to our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren for generations to follow. So from all of us here at AMAC, we thank you. Our members guide us and give us strength. I'm Rebecca Weber. Until next time, everyone, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.